And we're live. Thank you, everybody. Sorry for being a little bit late. But, yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff going down right now. And a whole lot of really, really disturbing stuff, too. Well, mostly it's just
Yeah,
one really disturbing topic, but yeah, we're not going to try to tease that until the end. Let's just get right into it. You want to introduce it, Esso?
sure, but I just wanted to say very quickly, I'm sorry to everybody about how long it took for me to fucking upload a new video because, oh man, I was not prepared for how meta I was. My analysis was going to be how much effort that took to write that. But yeah, so the first story that we have here today is that last week the Senate failed to pass a bill, a born alive bill, which for those of you who don't know, this is about abortion,
So,
obviously.
yeah, so basically what's going on is that there is a bill being proposed and being moved through the Senate, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. The way it works is that oftentimes abortions don't always kill the fetus, and as a result, it exits the mother's womb but is still alive. Standard procedure is that the fetus would either just be outright murdered or just left to die, basically gasping for air. And at that point, well, the Senate tried to pass a bill that would make sure that doctors would be required by law to keep it alive. And instead, they decided that no. Well, the bill was failed to pass. The bill required 60 votes in the Senate, and they only got 53 in support of it. So there was definitely a majority to support it, but I think what's very interesting is some of the stock arguments that some of the Democrat senators made in opposition to this bill. I
Aside from the fact that this is yet another example of how democracy kills, literally.
pretty much, but I mean, you won't believe me when I say that they're using stock phrases. Let's see here.
Janine Shaheen, I don't know how you pronounce that, but a Democrat from New Hampshire, in according to this bill, um, well, in response to this bill, she said, "This bill is just another line of attack in the ongoing war on women's health."
Tina Smith, Democrat from Minnesota, said the Born Alive bill would override physicians' professional judgment about what is best for their patients, and it would put physicians in the position of facing criminal penalties if their judgment about what is best for their patient is contrary to what is described in this bill.
By not killing babies.
Yes, after the baby is born, or after the labor is forcibly induced through, I don't know, I don't remember what the procedure is called, but they can force a woman to go into labor, which is how abortions work. And after the baby is born, they basically just either kill them or leave them to die. And for some reason, after this living being is removed from the woman's body, the external organism is still somehow a physical threat to the mother's health. Which I mean, like, if you're giving birth to an eldritch abomination or some kind of razor clawed, fanged monster, then maybe you could justify that. But since we don't exist in the realm of the TV show Black Mirror, we can reasonably assume that that's not going to happen.
And also, Ben Sass, a Republican senator, also said in support, "I know a lot of opponents of this bill sincerely believe the talking points." No, they don't. How
These
that not possible to believe some of this stuff.
these talking points are so absurd that
And
this
not
leads me
not
to
only that,
believe.
but this is the same regurgitated nonsense that abortion alarmists use for any case, in any time that they try to support their case.
It's the same arguments over and over again that abortion is a women's health issue, even though it's blatantly obvious to anyone that once the baby is born, it is no longer a woman's health issue. It is a baby's health issue. And for some reason they're treated to be exactly the same.
Yeah, that's a euphemism. It has nothing to do with the woman's autonomy or woman's health. The entire dichotomy by which the media is trying to construct this debate and how politicians try and construct this is false, which is that it's about autonomy. It's really not. Well, fundamentally, the debate is about whether, first of all, whether or not the baby is alive, which I think we've pretty concretely demonstrated that by the third week of the pregnancy, it's alive, and at the very moment that an egg becomes fertilized, it develops a separate DNA sequence from the mother, which makes it an independent being. So, I mean, the science is pretty clearly against the people who are claiming it's a bundle of cells.
Of course, that's rhetoric is just requires the whole point of that rhetoric is just to obfuscate. I mean, anyone who spends 5 seconds examining this issue can tell literally everything that has ever lived that is not a single cell organism is a bundle of cells. You are a bundle of cells.
Yeah, exactly. They say that like that is some sort of dehumanizing term, but even according to their debate, if it's not, a living being or a separate entity, then at what point does it become a separate entity? Why is it that when it's born, it becomes a separate entity if it's just a bundle of cells?
All right, one moment. Heartless Soy Boy donates $2. Thank you very much, Heartless Soy Boy.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyways, I think what's going on and what's going on with the abortion issue in general is that the state wants to be able to define what life is and when it begins. And clearly, what's going on here is that they're trying to normalize being able to kill people outside of the womb, because that's actually what's going on here. Life begins when we say it begins, not before and not after.
Yep, they want to define what life is and they want to be able to be the ultimate arbiters on who decides what lives and dies.
Which is also what universal healthcare is all about. Being able to not only dictate when people live and when they die, but being also the gatekeepers to people's
Not
access.
just not just that, the death penalty, the various acts of war, and what they do with the police. Essentially, the police are legally defined as not even people because they've done this to the extent that they have. They've given them exclusion from the legal standard everybody else operates within.
Ah, I gotta love the police. They have one set of rules for us and one set of rules for them. If I put on a blue suit, call myself a police, or better yet, a flabble, and then just started pointing guns at people, telling them that they must comply or die, people would be justified in defending themselves against me. Hell, people are justified in defending themselves against these abortion doctors, who I remind you are to a huge extent government funded. I mean, what is it, like 75% of Planned Parenthood's operation is, or their entire, or 75% of their budget is funded by the federal government?
Yeah, pretty much.
And how much, I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, but how much of the remaining 25% comes from actually being profitable? Or from
Pretty much
like their
none.
actual revenue?
Yeah, pretty much none. That's the reason that they freak out so much when you suggest defunding not just Planned Parenthood, but any of the organizations which are being funded by the state
Yeah.
that are key to their propaganda efforts.
Which brings up another point, because I've had this argument with a bunch of people both online and in real life, in the sense that like there's people, libertarians, or people who are leaning libertarian, who support abortion, who say that's like, look, it's not the government's role to decide, to make decisions on a woman's life, and if you use the government to ban abortion, then that's
Yeah, it's
not
because,
libertarian.
well, first of all, the government is not banning abortion. I mean, to say that it's the government banning abortion is like saying that murder is only unethical because the government banned it. Are you saying that's not libertarian to be against murder? Are you saying it's not libertarian to be against theft? That's and the fundamental problem with that argument is, like I was mentioning earlier, it approaches this issue from that false dichotomy constructed by the media and the state, which is that babies are not human beings and therefore don't possess agency.
I think I've mentioned before that a study in 2015 did the
Feed
groundbreaking groundbreaking findings in discovering that babies feel pain. This was something that should be so obvious to literally anyone who's ever, I don't know, accidentally caused physical harm to their baby. That's only
yeah,
now
they
been confirmed. It's only been recently confirmed in the last 4 years that babies feel pain.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, they develop a central nervous system, so a brain, a spine, and a heart within the first 5 weeks. And the very moment that the sperm meets the egg, it develops a separate DNA sequence.
Oh no, I wasn't talking about fetuses. I wasn't using babies as a euphemism for fetus. I mean like 6 months old, like 12 months old, 18 months old babies. Like it was previously believed that they couldn't feel pain, and this was used to justify all sorts of other horrible things like circumcision.
Yeah, that's incredibly dumb. I think that should just be self-evidently, like, that should just be self-evidently wrong because in order for a baby who's already born to function, they sort of need a central nervous system, which means they're capable of feeling pain because they have nerve endings.
You'd think that'd be very obvious, but no. But back to the question of whether libertarians should support abortion or not.
What are you saying? Babies don't have spines?
No, I'm saying that they don't have brains. They literally don't have nerve endings. They're just machines that just go around however they're programmed. I mean, didn't you read your own instruction manual when you were born?
Yeah, you can tell that they didn't actually think that, because people had been they had an intricate understanding of human anatomy long before, uh, just a decade ago, of the anatomy of a newborn baby. I mean, they've been perform people have been performing surgeries on babies going back at least 2,000 years. Now that's not a standard practice, but people have my point is that the anatomy of a newborn baby has been understood for a long time.
And back to the point about libertarianism and abortion. Like, look, we understand that it's not the government's role to ban abortion, but if 75% of Planned Parenthood's operating costs are paid for with actual government subsidies, and the rest of it is paid for mostly with donations from millionaires and billionaires who are pro infanticide, by the way. It actually wouldn't surprise me if. I don't know this off the top of my head, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were in favor of it as well, or were funding them directly as well. Someone look that up because I wouldn't be surprised if they were doing that because, well, Bill Gates is a is a omnicidal maniac. Anyways, we can see that their actual operating costs are well in excess of what they would gain in revenue. So as a result, like the abortion industry is not profitable. Nobody wants abortions, and the only reason it's even entertained in our modern society is in our modern statist and incredibly unethical society is because there is a concerted effort on the part of millions of people to make people think that abortion is perfectly fine and dandy. It's a woman's choice, you see.
Speaking of women's choice, the draft story.
Oh, right, yeah. Let me just pull that up real quick. So
So,
basically, what's going on here is, well, you want to talk about it?
sure. So essentially, a federal judge in Texas ruled on last Friday that women were not exempt from compulsory military service, so drafts.
So what?
And this is being paraded around in the media as a women's rights issue. So yay, women are also forced against their will to serve in the military. Yeah, wait a minute.
I think this is actually going to be a very good thing. Not because the draft is ethical for obvious reasons. I mean, I made a video about that. But because once women start to become enslaved into the meat grinder of war, where they'll also be traumatized, murdered, and killed, I can guarantee you'll have feminists up in arms that the womans are also being enslaved to fight and die for pointless wars. And as a result, you'll probably actually see a stronger push to end the draft for good.
Yeah, this is a I can kind of agree, but not necessarily for that. It's a this is actually a great point that shows that collectivism is kind of shit.
Kind
Put it
of.
put it simply. Yeah, everybody being equal, well, when you're equally forced into slavery where you're probably going to die or at the very least return home injured, uh, yeah, quality is not so good there, is it?
Well, it's not only they. It's not only because they come back injured. It's going to be because they come back traumatized. They're going to see things that no person should ever be forced to see, and
Mentally injured.
mentally injured. And well, I'm sure you're familiar with like the suicide rates among veterans. It's heartbreaking. The kinds of things that these people are forced to endure. I think it's arguably one of the most reprehensible things the government can do to a population, short of outright genocide.
But they need it. They need it though in order to defend us, and by defend us, they mean defend their fiat currency.
Which is pretty much exactly the sole purpose of any military engagement that's been going on for like the last, what, 40 years? 50?
Yeah, even before then, though, it was used as an excuse to try and generate revenue for the state.
Pretty much. And let's see here. Here's one quote on trying to come out in support of why women should be in the draft. The average
Well,
woman could conceivably be better suited physically for some of today's combat positions than the average man, depending on which skills the position required. Combat roles no longer uniformly require sheer size or muscle.
I just wanted to say very quickly to clarify, I'm not saying that war is profitable. That's the broken window fallacy. I'm saying that all of that investment generates a temporary inflationary increase in revenue for the state. Man. I'm just having a really hard time talking tonight for some reason.
Well, that's all right. Let's see here. Though the draft hasn't been seen in 1973, well, every male is required to sign up for selective service. If they don't, well, they get several privileges withdrawn from them, including their eligibility for student loans, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is every millennial and every Generation Z member is propagandized to about how absolutely essential university and college is to be employed. This is obviously not true, but you're basically withholding people's ability to start a life in by requiring them to sign up for selective service. Fortunately, they don't draft you after the age of 26, but that's still a 8-year window that you basically have to pray that they don't decide to arbitrarily start this draft again. They can at any point. And considering that the rising tensions with Russia, China, and Venezuela, it could conceivably happen at any time.
Yeah, what I'm noticing while never mind. But I
You're
had a point, but then while I was thinking about it, I thought against it. But no, I think that as this continues, we can only hope that more people will be moved against collectivism because the collectivists are painting this like this is a victory, of course, as we noted earlier. That compelling someone by force into a role is freedom because it makes them equal. I think that just sort of self-evidently demonstrates why this has absolutely nothing to do with freedom. Social justice doesn't.
Well, keep in mind the underlying assumption here that equality means that all things, including enslavement, must be on parity. Parity, not parity. Freaking hell, those words sound.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce those words differently. Anyways, yeah, speaking of Venezuela, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that roadblock on that 3-lane highway. No, it's not. I don't know if it's 3 lane, but it's like 3 bridges that are like right up against each other. Yeah. So one development that's come from that is that there was this guy. I forget it was his name. Let me look that up. There was a guy who did a benefit concert in Venezuela, and the Washington Post reported that he apparently had 200,000 people show up to do this concert. This concert happens to take place like right on the border, right on the edge of that bridge, that exact same bridge. And I know
It's
it's the
the
exact
exact
same
same.
bridge.
It's the exact same picture, not even the exact same bridge. If you look at the crowd in between the two pictures, everything is in the exact same place. It's just taken from a different angle. And I sent you a picture of it in Discord DMs,
Yeah, here it
comparing
is.
comparing the two side by side.
Yeah, so the Washington Post incorrectly, because of course they would do that, that there were 200,000 people for this Venezuela benefit concert. That's why I was there. Hey, Atomic.
What's up?
So the actual estimates of the crowd based on the photos available are around 18,000 if I recall correctly. But it's you can see like the crowds in several photos. I would show them on screen, but honestly I'm a little paranoid about opening something on a
Yeah, but
window.
the thing is, yeah, this one's for this is supposed to be for the U.S. attempting to get aid into Venezuela, but the other one is for a benefit concert. It's the exact same picture, but it's being presented in the media for two different purposes.
I
Like
think
that is lazy.
I don't
Let's
think
be
it's
clear about that.
I don't think it's laziness actually. I think they're trying to paint I think they're trying to use this as a propaganda piece.
Well, that's my point. They're just using the exact same picture, so it's incredibly lazy. But it's the state, so what do you expect?
Yeah. But I mean, I think what it is they're trying to make that highway, that roadblock, which basically consists of 3 storage containers and some very weak looking fences. They're trying to make that into kind of a symbol. The concert takes place like within spitting distance of that roadblock. So it's right there. And yet for some reason, that exact same city, I was looking it up on Google Maps last night. So and there are like 2 other roads from that town into Venezuela. Also, let's be honest here. If you look at the pictures, it's not a very long river. Building a pontoon bridge or even just a bridge to drive over would not be terribly difficult. So it's not like they're having trouble getting aid into Venezuela at all. I think it's just entirely a propaganda piece. And that whole roadblock is meant to be a symbol of some
The
kind.
town, by the way, is Kakuta, Colombia. I believe that's how you pronounce that. And yeah, the media says that's the town that it's in. But and we, with our weaponized autism, we looked it up on Google Earth, and we found that exact bridge within that town. So we can confirm that that is indeed the town that it's in. And yes, that's not the only road in Venice going to Venezuela in that town.
In that town, there are many other towns, and it's not like you can't move things by boat either. I mean, they're both connected to the frickin' Atlantic Ocean. You can just boat things over, or as the U.S. government is trying to do now, fly it by planes. But I think what they want is the symbol, much in the same way that the migrant crisis was initiated by that picture of the drowned boy along the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. I'm assuming you all remember that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I'm just helping elaborate.
Atomic, you haven't said anything.
Yeah, I'm just listening to you guys because you guys are basically talking right now.
Oh, well, I mean, did you have anything to say about it, or?
Not really. You pretty much. I'm trying to find the word because I can't think. Yeah, you pretty much described what I would have said anyway.
And of
All
course,
right.
and there's also this viral story of a truck fire, a truck fire. I'm sorry, like a truck that was carrying aid from the United States was torched in Venezuela. And of course, this is being shown as some sign of Maduro's oppression when how he's just arbitrarily refusing to send aid to people, to his own people. He's like deliberately starving them to death. He's a monster.
Yeah, which that's something Filthy and I were discussing before the stream. That's something that I pointed out, but there's a very obvious contradiction which you could see if you're taking this at face value, which is there's a humanitarian crisis within a humanitarian crisis, but yeah, it really only makes sense. I mean, because we can demonstrate as we're about to go into that the U.S. government is sort of banking on the Venezuelan government having us bringing democracy to Venezuela, regime change. But yeah, we can demonstrate that's the case. So this is more about propaganda in order to try and justify their militarization.
And I believe,
Yes, bringing freedom trademark.
and of course, guess what? Venezuela has an abundance. Say it with me now. It starts with an O and
Don't
ends with an
don't say
L.
it. The U.S. will come if you say it.
Don't say it. No, Isso's right. Don't say it. We already have the CIA watching us, and we don't want their nano Jews to infiltrate our ears. So
They'll bring democracy to our stream if you say it.
Wait, I have an idea.
what?
All right, if the CIA is watching this, Antifa has oil. I want to see
Yeah,
how that goes.
I think I've heard about that. Yeah, that they just have oil.
Yeah.
It's in like the. Why do you think they call it the black bloc?
Antifa
it's
becomes
not oil.
liberated.
Because of all the oil they have. Yeah, you should really check that out and see if Antifa needs democracy to be brought to them.
Yeah, just imagine
They're
the
not going to
headline.
drone strike Antifa
Antifa becomes democratic.
because of all the government agents they have within the Black Bloc. Yeah, they're not going to drone strike them.
Well, they don't need a drone strike them. They just need to bring democracy. I can't say it. Yeah, but
Hey,
anyway.
excuse me, country that no one knows about. Are you needing a little liberty?
Why, hello there, Iraq. Have you heard the good news about our Lord and Savior George Washington? Yeah, but anyways, what I'm seeing here is I had this thought last night is that Esso said it earlier. We have a humanitarian crisis within a humanitarian crisis. I mean, the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen stories, especially in the alternative and conservative media, about how people are starving to death in Venezuela. Like, one of my earliest videos is about the socialism diet and how Venezuelans lost an average 24 pounds in 1 year because of how scarce food is. And you can go back even further, like 2014, 2013, 2012, and see stories about how they had massive shortages of toilet paper, diapers, and cleaning products and stuff like that. Stuff that's pretty essential, but not, food essential. But the point is
Mises
that,
rolls in
like,
his grave.
there's already a humanitarian crisis going on and has been for a long time, but it looks like the United States is trying to set up Maduro to be the cause of it. Of course, they want to. I think what it is an a cult of anti personality, where they're going to use Maduro as a scapegoat for the failures of socialism in general, and as a result, like they're gonna have a military intervention into Venezuela. They're gonna use this humanitarian crisis that they completely manufactured within the humanitarian crisis that actually does exist as a pretense for getting their favorite socialist into power. Guido,
Which
by the
to
Throughout
way.
this entire
clarify,
story of
John,
oh,
Juan Guaido, I've seen quite a few progressive, quote unquote, YouTubers and personalities around claiming that he's like a free marketer. What are you smoking? He just praised Hugo Chavez on his Twitter account the other day.
Hugo Chavez basically being the socialist who. I mean, has Maduro done anything different than what Chavez would have done?
Guaido is basically just Maduro, except he's gonna trade oil with the U.S.
So he's basically. Yeah, they're basically the same. There's no free marketers there. There's not even
That's
Chicago school people there. There's no Pinochet in Venezuela, at least not that I'm aware of.
which that's the other thing that I think is going on here. The media is going to try and present Juan Guaido as some sort of free marketer, and his policies are free market. The moment that he actually, does replace Maduro, and then the problems in Venezuela are going to continue, and then the media is going to claim that Venezuela is an example of a free market in crisis, or that's an example of a libertarian society. How much do you want to bet?
I would not be surprised at all. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the whole point of this humanitarian crisis within a humanitarian crisis is to play on the narrative that Marxists have that, oh, Venezuela's not real socialist. The narrative is going to be that socialism didn't fail, Maduro did. Therefore, we just need something else. We just need a different socialist.
As you can see by the fact that there's a free marketer in there now who's failing in the exact same way that Maduro did, even though he's not a free marketer.
Pretty much, which is how I think it's going to go down. And they're definitely going to do something sooner rather than later. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to be next year or even 3 years from now. But it definitely looks like U.S. is gearing for a war there, especially considering U.S. is deploying special forces to Puerto Rico and Colombia in preparation for something. According to Russian media, more specifically, Russian Security Council Nikolai Patrushkev, I think that's how you pronounce it, has told some Russian media sources that the Russian government has identified that the U.S. is moving forces to Puerto Rico and Colombia. And guess what? Resource-rich country they're close to.
I wasn't sorry, I wasn't listening. I was pulling up some pictures for a point I was about to make. What what
Uh,
country?
well, they're deploying special forces to Puerto Rico, and Colombia. Guess what resource? Guess what resource-rich country those two are close
Venezuela.
to?
Yeah, Venezuela. I should have just guessed that's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
There are a couple of resource-rich countries in that region, though. Venezuela is just the most notable one, obviously. But yeah, about that truck fire that you were talking about earlier. Yeah, that's completely manufactured, as in like this isn't even like it's essentially on record at this point that the group which was trying to get the truck into Venezuela past the GNB, they torched the truck with gasoline. Like there are pictures of the people within that group pouring gasoline onto the truck and lighting it on fire while it's on the bridge in Colombia.
I'm sorry. What was the name of the group again?
The Gondola Quemada.
Are those the
I,
soldiers
I
in
think that's right.
t-shirts?
Yeah,
Yeah, those the soldiers in t-shirts, if you guys don't recall, tried to do that bombing in the or just they were responsible for like two bombings that were so elaborate and absolutely hilarious in terms of the failure. You have the assassination attempt on Maduro with the drones that had C4 strapped to them, which crashed into buildings and exploded, and then you have the attempted bombing on their parliament or their congressional building from a helicopter where they just dropped live grenades from the helicopter and they exploded midair. So these guys, while they are confirmed to be CIA assets. Well,
yeah,
yeah,
they are directly linked to the CIA, like through a paper trail which is publicly available. But yeah, there are pictures of them torching the trucks with gasoline and then lighting it on fire. But the media is claiming that it was the Venezuelan military which lit it on fire by blowing it up.
which of course makes sense on its surface because the Maduro regime has publicly exclaimed they're not wanting U.S. aid. But of course, that they would go so far as to try to torch a truck makes no sense to me. If they were really going to do something like this, they would just take the aid, distribute it among their citizens themselves, call it their own, make it a propaganda win, and say that, I don't know,
And
the truck was empty or the truck was always theirs and the US is trying to take credit or something.
and apparently there's an actual video of one of these soldiers in shirts throwing a Molotov cocktail at their own truck.
Yeah, this is
Not
definitely.
yeah, they're very. This is very clearly a false flag. Like that narrative. This is propaganda right here.
Which makes absolute sense since, as we've mentioned before, the US does use humanitarian aid as a cover for covert support for the for insurgent groups that the U.S. is trying to support to oust a regime that they didn't like. I know
Oh, they
that.
yeah, they've done this countless times. They did this in Libya. That's why a lot of these. That's why a lot of these government-backed NGOs are banned from a lot of countries, like India, for example. It's because they're known to do this. Essentially, that's their reputation.
I do remember reading that this was what was done in the 80s in Poland during the Polish Solidarity movement. The U.S. would smuggle in communication supplies and even arms to the Polish resistance to help them oust their regime. That was
Right.
it
That's
was
another
always
example.
it was always under the cover of humanitarian aid. Hell, they got the Vatican involved.
But yeah, they've done this in Yemen. I mean, of course, they did this in Syria as well. They did this in Afghanistan the during the 1970s. I mean, there have been a couple different times where some NGO groups been backed by the U.S. government, and then attempts to fuel an insurgent movement. Oh, and they did it in Cuba recently too.
I
Except
happen
that one was even more interesting because It was a series of different rap groups in the country that were spreading anti-Cuban government messages, and it turned out they were being funded by the CIA to do that. They were CIA assets.
Huh. Yeah, definitely. I think this is watch the other hand time. If you're going to be seeing, if the story becomes sensational, it's usually because there's going to be something else going on, and don't believe the official narratives. Think about who benefits from what and what are they trying to hide.
Exactly, which I sort of go over that in a bit more detail in my video that I just uploaded today.
Yeah, you guys should definitely watch it at least when we're done with the stream if you haven't watched it already. So, let's see here. I mentioned earlier that what are they called? The US is deploying special forces into Puerto Rico and Colombia. So remember when I said watch the other hand? This is something that Russia is reporting. While of course Russia is not a sympathetic organization by any means, especially since well, they're also a state. I think in terms of US foreign policy, they're a far more reliable source than our own government, which is has a direct incentive to lie to its citizens and is currently doing so a lot.
Which also this is incredibly interesting. Uh, Mike Pompeo today, who if you don't know, he's the U.S. Secretary of State. He admitted in an interview with Telemundo that well, he stated that U.S. foreign policy right now includes moving against regimes that are not democratic. And aside from Venezuela, he specifically mentions Cuba and Nicaragua.
Well, I mean
So,
that's hilarious because the US is still doing its best to cover up Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11 even though they're not democratic at all. So, obviously he's telling a bald-faced lie.
I just thought that was very interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, what definitely watch the other hand. Either Pompeo is an idiot or he's doing something absolutely terrible, and
Yeah,
the
that
burden of
sort
proof
of
is on them to tell us which one it
strikes me
is.
as weird. It strikes me as being very bizarre that he would just come out and say that.
I think that he's trying to distract us because, as far as I can tell, while the U.S. is not friendly with Cuba or Nicaragua, they don't quite have the same tension that the U.S. does with Russia, China, or Venezuela. I think he just thought of those off the top of his head or had some thing ready to say. The U.S. is obviously not going to be going after Cuba or Nicaragua anytime soon, to the best of my knowledge. I think it's just to create an
Okay.
illusion that they are. So, yeah, this is smokescreen time. Be very careful, I would think. It also doesn't help that apparently the U.S. is paying Microsoft 400 to 500 million dollars to develop a Halo-style HUD to give to armed forces. The idea of the HUD is that there'll be like Google glasses that soldiers will be wearing on the battlefield. If you guys are familiar with the Microsoft HoloLens, or just Google Glasses in general, then you guys should at least be somewhat aware of augmented reality, which is just like graphics that appear on the ground and can be interacted with as though they were not really interacted with, but they just appear as though they're physically there. So if you've ever played a video game, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with the concept of a heads-up display. That being said, apparently the U.S. military wants their soldiers to be equipped with a heads-up display as well. And of course, Microsoft employees are very upset about this. That they loathe the idea that that their work at Microsoft is going to help get people killed in some faraway war. I think what's going to happen here is the U.S. wants to have this technology ready by the time they invade Venezuela.
what this screams to me is it's about their developing of the space force. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I can't really think of anything to say about it. I mean, you pretty much you took my breath away on that.
Well, thank you for that. So let's see here. Did we cover basically everything we wanted to cover in regards to Venezuela? I think we did.
Yeah, there's not really much else to say about it.
All right, so the last thing I think we can talk about is there's this guy who apparently refused to pay taxes to the IRS and has refused to do so since 2001, was it?
1999, and his name is Michael Bowman, by the way.
Yeah, so this guy's a Christian who refuses to pay his taxes until the government stops funding abortion. He was sued by the US government for obvious reasons, and, well, he won his court case.
It's very interesting.
I mean, something
It
about this unsettles me.
What is it?
What a, like why was he allowed to win? What purpose did this serve? There's got to be some other motive. Maybe I'm just overly skeptical or overly paranoid, whatever the case may be. But it seems to me like there's some other interest that is being served here. Maybe his lawyers did make a compelling enough point that the judge had to concede that yeah, there's no justification.
Well, actually, the article very clearly says that the government tried to sue him for a fraud, essentially, because as you pointed out multiple times, if you don't, as you and I have pointed out, if you don't sign a 1040 form, then you won't have to have any obligation to pay income tax, even according to the state. But yeah, it says here that they tried to sue him for fraud, essentially, like fraudulently trying to get around paying taxes. But he was but the argument that was made is he said from the beginning, "I'm not paying taxes." So their point essentially was that he wasn't being fraudulent.
That's still very surprised. This still very much surprises me because I'm still trying to look for some hidden motive here that the government allowed this one to slip through.
Yeah, because for the record, I mean this is essentially the thing that the government. This is like the last thing that they'll fold on. They like social authoritarianism as a way to try and manipulate narratives and to try and also convince people that their vote matters. That's also why a big part of mainstream media narratives almost never focus on the economics behind how the state functions or what's going on, and if they do, it's usually in newspeak nonsense terms. But yeah, it's very bizarre because just ultimately this is the one thing that they'll absolutely never fold on because the state fundamentally is a thief. It's a parasite, and it absolutely needs the funding in order to sustain itself because, well, we've gone over this a couple times, and in order to do that, it needs to expropriate private resources. So
Yeah, and just to
you're
clarify,
right, it is incredibly bizarre.
Michael Bowman is not refusing to pay taxes on ideological grounds. He's most likely a conservative. He says he loves his country and has a duty to his country. He says that he also has a duty to his conscience. And the reason that he's refusing to pay taxes is because the U.S. funds abortions through direct subsidies to Planned Parenthood. which
It
is
says very clearly in the article he is a Christian. That doesn't necessarily mean he's a conservative, but the
you
way that he references religious freedom, it's very much indicative of how conservatives talk about it.
and like if you're a conservative and you're opposed to abortion, I'm obviously guessing here, but more likely than not, you're a conservative, just in general. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you have to be a Christian to oppose abortion. I mean, SO is agnostic, nor do you have to be a conservative to think taxation is theft.
I'm an
But
atheist, but okay.
you used to be agnostic. What happened?
Well, I simply realized that the entire framework around the scientific debate itself, the theism debate is presented as if it is a scientific debate, but the premise itself is fundamentally flawed, and therefore it couldn't be a scientific debate. So the theism debate itself is an unscientific is an unscientific idea, accepting the premise that there could even be a debate on the subject. So it's basically sort of a meta analysis of the theism debate, and that's the conclusion. And I've made my position very clear on just how, from a personal standpoint, I view the concept of deism or uh, deifying certain things. I think that every person has the ability to act in any way which a how a ecclesiastical being is described. I think that people can achieve those abilities through technological innovation, and everyone can be capable of doing that. So I think that at best, the concept of religion, even if it were possible to demonstrate, it really wouldn't matter because there's no point.
Well, all
I
right.
hope that makes sense.
Well, all right. Yeah, the point I'm just saying is that like you don't have to be Christian to be pro-life. I mean, pro-life is the most rational, objectively provable position in that debate. But anyways, yeah, but one thing I did note about the article when I was reading through it is that it doesn't specify to what extent he was refusing to pay his taxes. I mean, it just says refusing to pay taxes. Does that mean like he was refusing to pay income tax? Which I mean, the point about not signing the 1040 form is that it gets you out of paying federal income taxes, not state income taxes, not payroll taxes, not state sales taxes, just federal income. So was he just doing that? Was he doing something else? Was he somehow figuring out how to get out of payroll taxes, property taxes? I might have missed something, but did you see anything about that?
No, it's just income tax. It's the IRS. So
I would think that the IRS would also be collecting payroll taxes and other forms of
yeah, they
federal
do. But
taxes.
the article specifically says income taxes.
Okay. I mean, that does clarify things. Must have missed that. And apparently, someone in the chat says you need Jesus. Also, would you like a Crusader helm? We're going to liberate Constantinople.
Sure.
All right. Everybody in the chat, Dave's
Because right now,
Volt.
because right now they got Israel there.
Everybody, Dave's Volt
I
in the
don't know
chat
what you're
right now.
talking about.
Join us in liberating Constantinople, and I think we'll give it back to the Eastern Orthodox Church because why not?
How about you abolish all states there and make all the land private?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, we're basically since Constantinople was unjustly taken, us taking it back would just be a form of self-defense, I think, and that therefore our acquisition of it makes us the rightful owners. Therefore, we can give it to the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is not a government institution, and they would now be the rightful owners.
And yeah, to clarify, I'm aware of the fact that Constantinople is not in the Gulf region.
Well, I mean, it's a few hundred years overdue, but I think it's time. Anyways, yeah, I think that's it. Do we have anything else we want to talk about?
Not really. I mean, I think that was about it. Oh my God, I am amazed I was even able to make it through this fucking stream. And yes, I know they were still live. I don't know. I was having such a. I know why. It's because of that fucking video. I finished it today, and I had to. That drained me quite a bit.
I had to write, proofread, and edit a 39-minute video. So shut your whore mouth.
Yeah, but you uploaded that yesterday, and you finished it two
Before
days ago.
that, I edited a 40-minute video.
I just got done with it like 2 hours ago. So
Alright, we'll accept this. Alright, so everybody, thank you for coming on, and yeah, SO, show your stuff.
I'm esoteric and free, and I just uploaded a video on narratives and the media, along with our conspiracy theories, a reasonable position to take. That's the premise of the video.
Yeah. And my next video is going to be about the opioid crisis. I have a feeling I've already done a bit of research into that, and let's just say that I think the rabbit hole is I haven't fell in deep enough yet, but I'm sure it's going to be absolutely glorious. Expect that, I want to say the 29th.
I'll be waiting.
All right. And anyways, thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you on Friday around the same time or possibly an hour later. All right. Bye.